September 1814. The United States of America is on the verge of collapse. The war with Great Britain, now in its third year, has been a catalog of disasters. Just weeks earlier, the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., was captured and burned by British troops. The government was in exile, the treasury was empty, and national morale was at an all-time low. And now, from the north, came the knockout blow. The largest British army of the entire war, over 10,000 battle-hardened veterans, fresh from defeating Napoleon in Europe, was invading New York. Their goal? To march down the historic Lake Champlain corridor, split New England from the rest of the country, and force a humiliating American surrender. Standing in their way was a tiny, cobbled-together American army and a small, makeshift fleet. By all accounts, it was a hopeless situation. But what happened next in a forgotten corner of New York would become one of the most decisive and ingenious victories in American history. This is the story of the battle that saved the nation, the Battle of Plattsburgh. To understand the importance of Plattsburgh, you have to understand geography. For centuries, the deep channel formed by Lake Champlain and the Hudson River was the superhighway of North American warfare. It provided a direct water route from British Canada to the heart of the American states. Whoever controlled this corridor controlled the continent. In the American Revolution, a British attempt to seize it ended in their disastrous defeat at Saratoga. Now, in 1814, the British were trying again, but this time with overwhelming force. Their commander was Sir George Prevost, the Governor-General of Canada, and his army was a force to be reckoned with. Elite regiments who had fought and won against Napoleon's best armies in the Peninsular War in Spain. They were confident, disciplined, and they expected an easy victory. Their target was the small American base at Plattsburgh, New York. The key to the entire British campaign rested on one simple fact. An army this large, marching through hostile territory, needed to be supplied by water. Prevost's army could only advance as long as the British Navy controlled Lake Champlain. Therefore, everything depended on a naval showdown in Plattsburgh Bay. The American defenders were hopelessly outmatched. On land, Brigadier General Alexander Macomb had at best 3,400 men to face Prevost's 11,000 veterans. And Macomb's forces were a motley crew of regulars, raw recruits, and even military invalids. Knowing he couldn't win a straight fight, Macomb became a master of deception and delay. As the British advanced south, Macomb sent small bands of militia to harass them, burning bridges, felling trees, and mislabeling roads. He was buying precious time, forcing the massive British army to a crawl. He funneled them towards Plattsburgh, where he had built a series of forts and trenches south of the Saranac River. He made his small force look much larger than it actually was. On the water, the situation was more even, but still precarious. The American naval commander was 30-year-old Thomas McDonough. He was a meticulous, deeply religious, and brilliant naval tactician. His opponent was Captain George Downey, who commanded a slightly more powerful British fleet centered on his brand-new 36-gun frigate, the HMS Confiance. Downey was rushed into service, his flagship barely finished and his crew unfamiliar with the vessel. McDonough knew he couldn't win in the open lake, so he chose his ground carefully. He would let the British come to him. McDonough anchored his fleet in a line across Plattsburgh Bay, forcing the British to sail directly into his guns. But he did something else, something that would prove to be a stroke of pure genius. He knew his ships would take a terrible beating on the side facing the enemy, so he devised a way to turn them around in the middle of the battle without using sails. He used a complex system of multiple anchors and cables. In addition to his main bow anchor, he dropped another from the stern. He then attached special cables called spring lines to his main anchor line. By pulling on these, he could swing the ship from side to side. Finally, he had a kedge anchor, dropped far out, which would allow him to winch the entire ship around 180 degrees. It was an incredibly complex setup, but if it worked, it would allow him to present a fresh, undamaged broadside to the enemy when they least expected it. On land, Prevost finally had his army in position. He waited, delaying his assault on Macomb's forts until he heard the sound of Downey's fleet engaging McDonough. The fate of the land and sea battles were now completely intertwined. The stage was set. On the morning of September 11th, the British fleet rounded Cumberland Head and sailed into the bay. The battle began with a deafening roar of cannon fire. The first shot from the British flagship, the Confiance, was devastating. A single broadside crippled the McDonough's flagship, the Saratoga, killing or wounding 1/5 of its crew in an instant. The fighting was ferocious. A cannonball smashed a coop on the Saratoga's deck, releasing a rooster that flew up into the rigging and began to crow defiantly, much to the amusement and encouragement of the American sailors. McDonough himself was knocked out twice, but refused to leave his post. On the British side, disaster struck early. Captain Downey was killed just 15 minutes into the fight, crushed by one of his own cannons that had been dislodged by an American shot. After 2 hours of brutal close-range combat, the Saratoga was a wreck. Nearly every cannon on its engaged starboard side was out of action. The British, sensing victory, prepared to finish it off. The battle had reached its critical moment. This was the moment McDonough had planned for. He gave the order. His men cut the main bow cable and hauled on the kedge anchor lines. Slowly, painstakingly, under heavy fire, the massive warship began to turn. The battered, smoking side of the Saratoga swung away, and its fresh, untouched port side battery with fully loaded cannons swung into view, pointing directly at the equally battered HMS Confiance. The British sailors could only watch in horror. Their ship was too damaged to perform a similar maneuver. The Saratoga's fresh broadside ripped through them, and with their captain dead and their ship a ruin, they had no choice. The HMS Confiance struck its colors and surrendered. Seeing their flagship surrender, the rest of the British fleet was soon captured or forced to flee. On shore, Prevost heard the cheering from the American lines and saw the British naval flags coming down. His entire invasion plan depended on controlling the lake. Without it, his supply line was cut. He could not advance. Despite the fury of his subordinate officers who felt they could easily storm the American forts, Prevost made a fateful decision. He ordered a retreat. The largest British invasion of the war was over. The 10,000-man army turned around and marched back to Canada. The news of the stunning victory at Plattsburgh reached the American peace negotiators in Ghent, Belgium, at a critical time. They had been negotiating from a position of weakness, with the British demanding huge territorial concessions. But the victory at Plattsburgh, combined with the successful defense of Baltimore happening at the same time, changed everything. The British lost their main bargaining chip. The Americans could now negotiate a peace treaty, the Treaty of Ghent, that restored the pre-war borders. No territory was lost. The Battle of Plattsburgh is often called America's forgotten victory, overshadowed by Andrew Jackson's more famous but strategically less important victory at New Orleans. But on September 11, 1814, the brilliant defensive strategy of Alexander Macomb and the naval genius of Thomas McDonough decisively thwarted a catastrophic invasion, secured the nation's northern border, and saved the young United States from potential dismemberment and defeat. It was the crucial turning point of the war. Do you agree that this is America's most important yet forgotten victory? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a pivotal moment in history, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of the battles and strategies that shaped our world. Thanks for watching.